Okay, so I'm going to continue looking at the five skandhas this week, and I'm going to just see if I can just post something in the chat of the basics of what they are. Does that come through? Yeah, I can see that. Good. So I know, yeah, both of you watched last week, so I don't need to recap too much, but just to remind us what the five skandhas are. The skandhas are like the five aspects or branches of our experience as embodied beings. So they are rupa, our experience of form, vedana, our experience of feeling, by which is sort of meant the sort of spectrum from pleasure to pain and neutral in between. Samnya, which is perception, or the whole sort of perception system of perception that we have of recognizing and sort of understanding the sort of jumble of sense experience that we have. Samskara is volition. That is to say, our choices, particularly our sort of ethical choices, habits, and so on. And then finally, vijnana, often just translated as consciousness, but it's quite helpful to think of it as sort of divided consciousness, that sort of sense of I, me, here and there, and so on. Okay. It's quite interesting. The Buddha came up with a number of images. I might have mentioned one or two of these last week, but there's a sutta called the Phena Sutta, Phena Sutta. Phena means foam, and this sutta was given by the Buddha when he was standing next to the river Ganges. So you could sort of see that he was sort of using images that were quite immediate. At least he started off with those. So he gave an image of each of these aspects of our experience, which emphasizes its sort of fleeting, impermanent nature, its insubstantiality. And in a sense, that's what we need to do with these, the sort of content of these different branches of our experience. It's not that we need to completely let go of them, otherwise we just have no experience, and that's not the point. The point is that to let go of fixedness, of being fixed, of sort of holding on to things. So in a way, seeing that anything in our experience, so that the image that he used with rupa was like foam, a glob of foam. If you're looking at a river flowing, you know, rivers have got sort of waves on them and they throw up spume or foam. And if you've ever sort of stood on a little bridge and looked down, you sort of notice that these are constantly sort of changing, separating, merging, separating again differently, and the shape is constantly sort of moving. And, you know, so it is with form, our bodies or the various forms of form that we hold on to, like possessions that we might think they're permanent, but actually they're in constant sort of flux and change. The image that he used for Vedana, well, imagine that you're looking at that river and it starts to rain. Big, heavy drops of rain, like you'd get in the rainy season in India. And when they fall on the water, it forms a sort of bubble. And feeling, he said, is like that because it's so fleeting that, you know, feeling sort of constantly arising, constantly sort of arising and passing away. It comes in, it disappears from existence even as it's coming into existence. Yeah, it's so sort of fleeting feeling. It's not fixed. And then sanya perception, he likened that to a shimmering mirage, a sort of fault of vision. So it's something that, you know, we think that we're seeing reality when actually we're just sort of seeing a kind of construction, as a sort of an optical illusion. So all the sort of fixed views that we've got about things aren't as fixed as we think. They're sort of insubstantial. The image that he gives for samskara, which is our volition, our choices, is that they're like a banana tree. Okay, so imagine if you're going up to a banana tree and you're looking for the sort of solid core of the banana tree. So you take an axe to the banana tree and you think, I'll just get past all of these sort of leafy bits of bark on the outside, and then I'll find the core. But actually, banana trees don't have a core. So you just sort of carry on taking this, and eventually you'll be left with nothing. Okay. So yeah, so our choices and volitions, that there isn't a sort of self to be found there. They're just a sort of collection. It's like, you know, our actions form habits and habits form personality. There isn't something solid there. There's only the results of individual actions. Then finally, with Vijnana, he uses the image of a trick performed by a magician's apprentice at an intersection. So at that time in India, that's what you got, these sort of entertainers who gathered at the crossroads where lots of people would pass. And well, some of those would be magicians who'd even sort of be able to conjure up images of elephants and so on. But yeah, the idea that even our self, this sort of permanence of there being a sort of here and there, is actually just a sort of magician's trick, as it were. We've in a way we've conjured it up ourselves. We are the magician's apprentice. Okay. So I suppose he's just, with these images, he's just encouraging us to, yeah, to let go of fixedness. Now, I think last week I mentioned one way of working with the skandhas, which in a way just to sort of apply them to something that's going on in the moment, something particularly that might come up in meditation. I gave the example, I think, of my current example of house sales and and so on. And in a way, just sort of noticing the different aspects, the fact I was sort of tensing my body about it, that I was holding on to sort of a fixed sense of houses and property, and I had a particular perception that happiness might come from those, and so on. So in a way, that's one way you can use the skandhas. But this week, I'd just like to focus on, in a way, sort of going a bit sort of deeper in a way, of just, in a way, the skandhas are a way in that can sort of tell us of ways in which we might hold on more generally to these different aspects of our experience. Perhaps that'll be clear as I sort of try to give some examples. So starting with rupa, form. Well, form exists in our experience, so it's not about trying to pretend that it doesn't, but we form this relationship with it, like especially with our own bodies. So, for example, and these are all things that different personalities do in different combinations. So, some people, for example, identify very strongly with the body. That might take the form of identifying with being very attractive to others and being very sort of concerned to make oneself attractive, or the thing about just being sort of super healthy, almost like a kind of to the extent that it's almost like a neurotic obsession, is to sort of get all the sort of health supplements and to be sort of super fit or whatever. I mean, there's probably other examples as well, even I suppose being attached to being unhealthy or whatever, but a really sort of close, this is me, really sort of holding on. Another form of this to do with the form of physical possessions, just really, or as I said, in a way, being attached to a particular place or property, whatever. These are all form, and of course we sort of hold on to these. That this is my existence. This is the sort of source of my satisfaction and happiness, to have all these things or all this property or whatever it might be. Or just sort of being attached to a particular place and not wanting to go away from it, even if you need to. These are all ways in which we sort of fix onto form. Okay, in different ways. You can probably think of different examples. So we need to just have that image of the globs of foam on a river, that actually form is constant flux. Okay, there's nothing we can really sort of fix onto. A positive relationship with form is well, in a way, like with our own bodies, it's not that we need to completely go to the other extreme and neglect our bodies, but in a way, the middle way, which the Buddha himself followed, is just to look after your body to the extent that is necessary, to sort of keep it going, so that you can live a spiritual life, so that you can develop and grow. Yeah. Likewise, a healthy relationship to property and possessions is just something, well, that they're useful, that we can use, but we can sort of use for a greater sort of benefit, as it were. Yeah. So that's rupa. In terms of Vedana, of feelings, pleasure, pain, well, that I think we'll probably come across people, or might even be people, who sort of hold on to, well, life is about having a good time. It's all about that sort of superficial pleasure, or it's about amassing sort of experiences. Life is about having good experiences, of sort of having a bucket list of, jumping off the Angel Falls in a parachute or whatever you do, um, yeah, I am the person. That's who I am. I have these experiences or whatever. Um, uh, or just sort of generally being kind of quite rigid about one's likes and dislikes. We all do this to some extent. But but holding on just quite tightly to, well, if it isn't exactly how I like it, it's not good enough, sort of thing. Whether that's food or interior decor, the color of your curtains, whatever it might be. Uh, uh, yeah, I am the person who has that particular sort of taste. So it's sort of holding on to that quite rigidly. Or I think sometimes you can also see that in our personalities, there are some people that are sort of biased towards pleasure and happiness and everything being great and lovely. And there are other people who are sort of see things through a sort of more lens of they look at the problems of life. That can be a bit sort of gloomy, problem oriented. You ask some people how they are, and they sort of say, "Oh yeah, everything's great," and other people sort of say, "Oh, it's awful. This is happening, that's happening, and all the rest of it." So it's almost like we have a sort of lens. And well, actually, there's both, isn't there? That somehow, um, well, letting go of that sort of bias or identifying with one or the other. In a way, it implies, well, a healthy relationship to Vedana would just be um, being quite equanimous about about um, pleasure and pain, sort of acknowledging, having a sort of healthy enjoyment of pleasure, but also, a healthy sort of patience, as it were, with displeasure or pain, and and not having that cognitive bias towards one or the other, I suppose. Yeah. So that's Vedana. Sanya, um, uh, yeah, different examples of how we might um, identify ourselves in that way. I think I mentioned this a little bit last week. So, for example, um, having a particular view of the world, um, whether that's a sort of political view, like, seeing everything through the lens of, say, Marxism or free market libertarianism, or people have, views like being the earth is flat and so on. And you just can't persuade them otherwise, because they see everything through sort of that lens that is just quite fixed. Um, so yeah, we hold on to these views, or even just a sort of general view that um, I'm very clever and I know what's going on. That my view is right. That all those other people are a bit stupid and they're not as enlightened as me, because I've got the right view. Okay. So that all becomes very sort of fixed, all very fixed. And of course, we're not then open to other people's views. Or even just sort of thinking that, not really questioning your own cultural bias as well. That, our cultures give us a certain bias. Sort of if we're part of a kind of modern industrial sort of culture, uh, then we sort of see matter as being just atoms and sort of dead, and we slightly look down our noses or regard as sort of nice and quaint, say, cultures that are animist and see everything as alive. We just assume that, oh, well, of course, we've got the right view and they've got the wrong view. But have we? But have we? Yeah, that's sort of holding on to your own biases, in a way, your own cognitive lens, your own cognitive bias, really identifying with it. So a positive relationship with samnya, again, it doesn't mean that you sort of have a sort of neutral, I don't perceive anything kind of thing. We all have our sort of perspectives. But we need to recognize the relativity of that. We need to sort of acknowledge that, well, yes, I am seeing things. I see things this way, but actually that's because I've inherited a particular sort of lens. It's not absolute. And that, maybe this person from another culture or from a completely different political view from me or philosophical view, maybe I should just sort of have a bit of patience and listen, because they might just have something. So a positive relationship with samnya is just that, a kind of openness and flexibility, and a humility, I think, with regard to our views of things. Samskara, so samskaras are choices and habits and volitions. We like our roles, don't we? That's one way this manifests. Even if you remember as a child, when you sort of began to play as a child with other children, we like to sort of set ourselves up in roles, don't we, as children? As doctor, I'm the doctor, or I'm the nurse, or and that gives you a certain sort of, oh yeah, I'm this thing. It gives you a certain sort of security or something, having a role. And of course, we continue this in our lives. I remember when I first started sort of working as a town planner. I'd studied for a few years to become a town planner. Then I got a job as a town planner. I remember, had my suit on and sort of walking around. I sort of had this moment of feeling, oh God, yeah, I am somebody. I'm somebody, aren't I? Do you know what I mean? Um, uh, and of course, in a sense, okay, it's not the most evil thing in the world, but it can just become a bit, we can then sort of fix onto those sort of things. We can even do it, within the Buddhist community in terms of being, I don't know, the chair of a center, or even just somebody who does what I'm doing now in terms of teaching Buddhism. Then to sort of hold on and say, oh yes, I'm a teacher of Buddhism. And then that all becomes a bit self-conscious and like ego is sort of creeping around it. If we sort of start thinking of that as who I am, rather than just something that I happen to be doing at the moment, or whatever. So that's one thing, is that sort of attachment to roles when it comes to samskara, but also just sort of habits. Like, I'm not the sort of person that can get up early in the morning, and just regarding that as unchangeable, can't do it. Or even the sort of more subtle roles or identities that we take on, like, I'm a joker. I always have a laugh. I always make people laugh. It's my role, as it were. Um, um, yeah, we've probably all come across people who've been a bit like that. That in any situation they just want to sort of extract a joke from it or whatever, um, or I'm the sort of person who does a lot of good. I'm I do good in the community. I help people and the rest of it. Nothing wrong with helping people, but again, it's that fixing. It's almost like and then you meet them and they just want to help you in some way, and actually you don't necessarily want it, because they're sort of fixed in some way in terms of, oh, I'm a do-gooder. Do you know what I mean? I do good, that sort of idea. Or so there's just sort of fixedness. So again, what's the healthy relationship to samskara? It's not to sort of not have samskaras, not to have volitions or to do nothing. But it's just to have again a sort of openness about it, just a sort of more of a sort of dynamic kind of open response to situations or to other people, just to sort of sense what they actually need, and not sort of relate to people in any sort of role, but just as a being almost, yeah. So finally, vijnana. What I suppose all of these things can add up to is just this sort of a kind of core, a sort of fixed core of identity. That all of these things that I've mentioned, or one or two in particular, are who I am and who I always will be. Um, um, yeah, in a way, that's the sort of core of ego, of just sort of seeing oneself as this constant and fixed aspect of the universe rather than something sort of flowing. The positive side of vijnana is it's the sort of core of our sort of self-awareness. Because I've got a sort of sense of myself, and a sort of memory stretching back to when I was a child. I've got a sort of story, and that enables me to have a sort of sense of a sort of progression, a kind of growth, a spiritual life in a way, or a sense of sort of positive change. So it gives me that sort of, it's like a thread, I suppose. I'm not just a succession of random experiences arising and passing. In the moment, there's a thread there, and on the basis of that story, as it were, well, vijnana gives me a sort of a sense of being able to sort of take that story in a sort of more liberating, freer, sort of positive direction of growth. Yeah. So that's a positive relationship to vijnana. Vijnana provides awareness and the continuity by which one knows one's spiritual and moral condition. Yeah. That's a quote from somewhere. Can't remember where. So yeah, from that, I hope you sort of get one of the sort of uses of the skandhas, is that it helps us sort of see within ourselves, and well, what are the aspects that I tend to cling on to? We all differ in that way, and then just in a way seeing that then these aren't sort of fixed. They can't be sort of fixed. We can't really sort of hold on to them. That life is king in a way, as Sangharakshita wrote. Life is a flow. It's change. It's not substantial. It's not fixed. It's not permanent. And nor are we on any level. So rather than open it up into a sort of nihilistic, I am nothing, it opens up into just a way of being, which is more like a flow, more changeful, more open, more responsive, more flexible, less bounded in a way, more unbounded. So that's the skandhas. Yeah, that's all I'll say for the moment.